Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show. I'm Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator. Glad to be back here with you on another edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. You'll be able to call into the program a little bit later on this evening at 951-221-8221. 951-221-8221 is the call number, and I will have that available to you a little bit later on in the program. Also, we're going to be having a guest that's going to be joining me tonight that will be joining us down at the bottom of the hour. His name is David Melton. He is the president and chairman of Reform Illinois, which is also an organization that my friend, the former retired clerk of Cook County, David Orr, is a part of. And he's going to be joining me, and we're going to be talking about the Michael Madigan verdict and what that means for politics here, and really what it means for the opportunity for us to have some real reform and legislation in the General Assembly. And so we're going to be talking about that at the bottom of the hour. Now, some of you may have seen that I did a brief live. I was down in my hometown this past weekend, and Saturday morning, I got up and I did, before we started our day, I did a live really of admonition and sort of reflecting on where we are in the state of things right now, politically, on a national basis, which also impacts us on a local and a state basis. We have some very challenging times that we are in currently, and we have some very challenging times that are going to be before us. But even though we have challenging times that we're in, we also have great opportunity to do something about them. None of what we are facing are things or issues or events that we don't have the ability to challenge. We have the ability to address, but that means that we have to engage them. We have to organize ourselves to be in a position to engage them. We don't have the funds that the oligarchs control and the big checkbooks, but what we do have is we have a lot of people that we can organize for, and that is much more forceful than even a big checkbook. But the big checkbook will always swallow us up when we don't engage ourselves in the process. And so my absolute commitment and all of my energies and efforts in doing this work, in trying to reach us, in trying to share, and trying to learn, and trying to put forth information for us, is to get us, as many of us as possible, to spread the information of the critical importance that we must engage. We must engage the system. To fix the system, we have to be a part of it. You have to get involved in order to correct those areas that we know are broken. We have to fix those areas of the Democratic Party that are not working well, so that the party works well and it runs well for the advancement of our people and for the advancement of our communities, for the advancement of our country. It is the only vehicle that we have to work with. The other vehicle is not an option for us, although there might be some members of the other vehicle that might be willing to participate in some parts of legislation. But the party overall is geared for representing the real wealthy that basically has been licensed to buy and own and bribe politicians and judges. The way that we combat that is that we have to use the resources that are available to us. And if we don't use the resources that are available to us, then we allow for them to run amok and to run away with the only system that we have, which is our democracy. And it is the one system that we have to continue to work on to make it a more perfect union, meaning that we have to improve it. But you can't improve something if you're not engaged in the process. And then you have to also have the understanding of how those processes work and how they will be beneficial to the masses and to a broader sect of our existence in our communities. So I did this on Saturday, and some of you may have watched it, and I just talked about. And I spoke particularly to two groups. One, the group of Black people who did not go and vote, and to the group who, in their frustration, allowed for their frustration to get in the way of a better decision, and they went and voted for the thug in chief that we have occupying the palace at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That what we see happening now is what they chose, is what they said was better than the progress that was being made under the previous administration. And that we could have continued had we elected Kamala Harris and whoever would have been her, well, we know who would have been her and her vice president. But had we elected them, we could have continued the progress while continuing to work to repair and to fix parts of the Democratic Party that is seriously broken. That's how this works. There is no quick fix in improving these conditions, but you make progress and you make steps. But when you take steps backwards, the steps that you take backwards are greater and very much more difficult to try to make that up. And we took a huge step backwards in electing the people that are in charge of our government now. And there are many, many people who are frustrated, many people who are just not, that are not happy, and people who are explaining to us, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on MSNBC, whether it's on CNN, that are explaining to us on NBC, ABC, CBS, that they're explaining to us and explaining to you where we are and what is happening. Yes, it is serious. It's not the end of the world, and it's not the end of the story, but it is serious. And we must mitigate whatever the damages are to come, whatever the um, lengths that those damages could be. Now, I am not sitting here saying what they are and how far back. We don't know. But what we do know is that they basically have told us what they're going to do, and they are doing, or certainly attempting to do, what they've told us that they're going to do. We don't know um, the level of erosion at the bureaucratic level. I mean, the people who are the career servers and the career personnel who actually work the processes every day in and day out, year in, year out. These are the career people who don't take to the politics, but and there are those who are inside working, and when they see things that are um, challenging and certainly see things that are problematic, I'm sure that there are some people who really take their jobs very seriously and work to mitigate any kind of damages that could be done. And many of those people are being challenged. Many of those people are trying to be forced out. We just don't know the extent of what that will be. Now, I watch all of these outlets. I watch clips from uh, all of the news shows, and even though I was out with over the weekend with family, I still, when I come back in, try to get at least caught up, or to have some understanding as to what's going on in the world. And over the weekend, I saw and or listened to, or on Sirius XM, listened to MSNBC over the weekend with Michael Steele. And Michael Steele was, who is a Republican. Michael Steele is a Republican. He's a conservative person, but he is someone, or certainly has that conservative philosophy. Now, his politics, I believe, has evolved um, from the party that he once was the chair of the Republican National Committee. And he was on this weekend, and he was expressing, and of course he has a much larger platform, he was expressing the frustration that many of us have. Many of us have. He was expressing that same frustration. And so I wanted to share that clip with you, of his frustration, because what his frustration exemplifies is the frustration that many of us have, is that, one, we've allowed for these people to get into place. And yes, we have the gatekeepers. We have our judiciary. We have that wall of the judiciary of people who are fighting against um, these decisions, and fighting against what, in many respects, are a violation of our Constitution. Doge, as they call it, I call it dog Elon. That's what I call it. No, I don't call it Doge. I call it dog Elon, who is acting as a savage dog on our democracy, and who is operating illegally, because the president doesn't have the authority to set up another governmental arm without the approval of Congress. So Doge or Dog E is not even legitimate, but he has turned it over to this man. And so Michael Steele certainly expressed his discontent with that, and it went viral. People are still talking about it, but I wanted to play that because it absolutely exemplifies some serious concerns that they need to take into consideration, those people who we have entrusted into power. But I don't want for us for a minute to think that we have that we can just sit around or sit on our laurels and wait for them. They have to be pushed by us. We have to be as actively engaged and organized in order to make sure that our voices are heard and responded to. Because your voice can force change. Your voice can force the repudiation of some of these things that they are trying to turn the clock back on. Take a look and take a listen to what Michael Steele said. Also, later on, if I get a chance, I'm going to read from the book that I purchased and read, Eddie Glaude Jr., who wrote the book, We Are the Leaders That We Have Been Looking For. So I'm going to be reading some excerpts from this book. If you haven't gotten this book, you should try to get it. But I'm going to be reading some excerpts from this book, and we're trying to get Eddie Glaude to come on the program and to talk about just what is it that our responsibilities are. Take a listen to Michael Steele, who was on MSNBC this weekend.
What would you have us do?
I would actually, you know what? I'd just like you to show that you give a damn, that you got a little emotion about the fact that people are losing their jobs indiscriminately, that this individual sitting down at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue has given absolute power to one man who brings his son into the Oval Office, whose son says to him, "You're not the president. You shouldn't be in that chair." Now, where did he get that from? He got it from his daddy, because that's what his daddy thinks of the man who brought him into the Oval Office. So I just like to see somebody wake the hell up and get excited about the fact that your country is under assault. They're not at the gate anymore. They're in your bedrooms. They're in your living rooms. They're in your businesses. They got your data, dumbass. They got all your stuff. Elon Musk has his tentacles in everything you're doing, not just off of X, but now he's in the Treasury Department. He's in the Labor Department. He's in the Department of Homeland Security. And nobody seems to give a damn. So that's all I want, somebody to show that they care enough to get off their fat ass and say something about it.
This is the frustration that you are seeing because it seems as though, and I know that there are people who are actually doing work. Certainly, the judiciary is doing their job. Now we have systems of government that protect us from people becoming dictators, as many of us believe that Donald Trump wants to be. And he's already expressed that, even in his first term, that he's a president, he can do whatever he wants to do, and he should be able to do whatever he wants to do. So he does have expressed to us that he would like to be able to run the country as a CEO of his business, that he can decide on whatever he wants to do and not have to go through the democratic norms that our country is set up by. we have three branches of government. We have the executive, we have the legislative, and we have the judiciary. And all three were set up by the founders to evolve and to keep the other in check. So that's the system that we have, and Donald Trump wants to just do away with that. He wants to be able to do whatever he wants to do and shouldn't have to be accountable to anybody. Well, that's not the system that we have. Now, what he's talking about is Elon Musk in this Doge, or I call it Dog Elon, because in a most savage way that he is trying to and attempting to absolutely destroy the whatever systems that our founders have put into place more than 250 years ago, and that we have operated under, that we have worked to try to improve over decades and centuries, that they are trying to completely unravel and to destroy that by throwing everything in the kitchen sink against the wall and seeing what they could possibly have to stick. Now, the one thing he's doing, he's not able to change constitutional systems, but he is impacting, and we don't know the level of what that would look like, impacting how our government is or will function, and what that will look like in terms of efficiency, and what that will look like in terms of process, and the bureaucracy of it. There's none of us who don't believe that government should be more efficient, and certainly that we should deal with any waste, fraud, and abuse. That always has to be looked at. But when you're operating a system as large as our government, there are going to be challenges of making sure that waste, fraud, and abuse are mitigated and minimized. You're not going to have a 100% system, but we can improve upon that system. But what they are trying to do is not about improving upon it. In fact, they're not interested in improving upon it. What they're doing is they're just shifting the use of resources. They haven't demonstrated or proven any area. All of the areas that they've attacked are needed support for people like U.S. aid, which is less than 0.5% of our federal budget, but it does great work in other countries of helping children, preventing children from starving, and preventing widespread diseases from spreading in those countries that could ultimately breach our country and cause all kinds of detriment to our national security here. So that 0.5% does vital work in other parts of the world. That's what they call soft power. You've been hearing about soft power, and you've been hearing about hard power. You've been hearing about hard power coming from Pete Hegseth, the person who is now in charge of the Pentagon. And they're just talking about brute force, and but this, and really they're talking about that so that they can do away with things like U.S. aid, which is a soft power that we can help other countries, and by providing the needs, assistance in other countries that need that assistance, those countries will be more in alliance with us. But if we're breaking them down, they're going to go to places like China and go to places like Russia, and they're going to be looking to those areas and those countries for assistance. And if they get those countries to assist them, then guess what they end up doing? They end up working with those countries that could become a problem for our country. So the idea of cutting off this, that's not about waste, fraud, and abuse. They're going after these systems. It's not about waste, fraud, and abuse. They're simply trying to deflect attention in order that they can shift, and they will shift resources, not cut waste, but they're going to shift resources to where they're able to use those dollars to give to the wealthy, the tax cuts. Take away from the poor, take away from the middle class, take away from people who need that help, and use those same dollars to give to people who don't need it. Subsidizing wealthy people, rich, super rich people who don't need it. That's what this is about. This is the power shift that they have put into place. Now, so I watched over the weekend, I watched several of online, watched several of the shows, and they're all talking about the same thing, how they are instituting things that are not even within our Constitution, that they are trying to bypass the legislative process to enact them. This whole Doge thing, again, I call it dog, Elon Musk's playpen, but this is something that is supposed to go through the channels of our legislators. If the president wants to set up another governmental arm, he has to go through Congress. That's the way the Constitution is set up. But he basically has handed this one person a free hand to do what they're attempting to do, and wrecking our government. Now, what his intent is, or what his motivations are, we are learning what his motivations are. And that is going to take some time and certainly investigation. But what we have to do is, as voters and as citizens, we have to push back against this type of corruption at the federal level. And we certainly have to make sure that we deal with it on our local and our state level. Corruption is corruption. It doesn't matter whether it comes through a Republican, doesn't matter whether it comes to a Democrat or whatever label or flag that you fly under. We as the voters, we as citizens have to organize and engage ourselves to be in this process to make sure that we can impact and certainly influence the types of protections and reforms that we need to have put into place, period. Now, I saw one Instagram, or I guess it was a TikTok a piece where somebody talked about what they're doing is a coup. And in some forms, I guess you could say that, because they're certainly trying to go around what our democratic processes are and our democratic norms are. And so I guess you can characterize it in some way as a coup. But again, I don't want for us to fall into the despair that we can't do anything. We absolutely can, because we've bounced back and we've fought through these types of acts of tyranny. We've fought through them before. This type of fascism that they're trying to inflict on us. But I still believe that we must know that there are more of us than there are of them. There are more of us than there are of them. And we have to engage more of us in that process. We have to get those people who feel like they're powerless. We have to help them to understand that they're not powerless, that they have to be engaged in the process. And being engaged in the process, they will certainly have the power. I want to move now to the conversation I talked to you about. I was teasing it up a little bit later on. I didn't get a chance to talk about it last week. And of course, last week, one of the most powerful people in Illinois politics, and certainly in most of our adult life, was convicted last week. Michael Madigan, the former House Speaker, was convicted of corruption. And I wanted to talk about that and what that means for our state, and is there an opportunity for us to really reach to the General Assembly, which has been blocking reform legislation for decades. And here to join us to talk about that is my guest, who is the president and chairman of Reform Illinois. His name is David Melton, who is joining us right now. David, thank you very much for joining the program.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
So we have what I call the second head of the two-headed beast that was convicted. Two of the most powerful men who have impacted our politics for many years, for the last 50 years. Michael Madigan and Ed Burke. Ed Burke is serving a 2-year sentence for his conviction, and Michael Madigan last week was convicted of 10, I believe it was 10 charges that he was convicted on. There were 7 not guilty and 6 that the jury was hung on. So what does this really mean for us, and what kind of opportunities do we have here?
Well, it means that Mike Madigan's way of doing politics has finally caught up with him, in that he was using some corrupt means to exercise and claim additional power, and those means were improper, placing people in no-pay jobs and engaging in that kind of behavior. It's an opportunity, I suppose, for us to take a look at our overall ethics laws and try and find ways to improve them. We've joined together, our group has joined together with Change Illinois and Common Cause Illinois. And a couple of years ago, we gave the legislature a list of things that we considered minimum changes to the ethics standards that would improve the ethics in the state of Illinois, to address some of the problems that of the type that we've seen in the Madigan trial. And some of those changes that we've suggested included empowering the Legislative Inspector General's Office, which is the body that investigates alleged wrongdoing within the legislature. Right now, that body has to get permission from legislators before they can open an investigation. They have to get permission from the legislature before they can subpoena anybody, and there are other constraints on them. We think those constraints basically should be lifted. We think that lobbyist reports to the state should have to be more complete. We think that there should be a stricter revolving door limitation so that when people leave government, leave the legislature, they have to wait for at least a couple of years before they can start lobbying their former colleagues. And we think that there are lots of changes that can be made to the campaign finance system to reduce some of the problems that exist in that system, although admittedly in that sphere, our action is limited to some extent by a series of decisions that have been issued by the Roberts Supreme Court since 2007 that have undercut efforts to regulate the campaign finance system. But there are still some things we could do, like adopting a definition of what constitutes coordination between a supposedly independent PAC and a campaign. Right now, politicians all over the place are making a joke out of that regulation and are in fact coordinating closely with supposedly independent PACs, which is at odds with the whole Supreme Court rationale for why that stuff is constitutional. So there are changes like that that can be made to the campaign finance laws. We also think that enforcement of the conflict of interest rules could be beefed up as well. So those are some of the things that we think could be done at a legislative level to improve the situation.
So of course, much of those things, and certainly proposals that have been put before the legislation have been blocked for decades in terms of reform. And I think we have a much clearer picture now as a reason to why those things were blocked, so that they can carry on the kinds of corruption that was carried on. I can't help but think of the magnitude of the waste, the fraud, and the abuse that has been inflicted on the people of Illinois, and how much better off we could be in all of those areas, like pension, payments and reforms, and all of these areas where we could be doing much better, where we're probably not doing because of the corruption of people like Michael Madigan and Ed Burke. And these are people who are in powerful positions that were supposed to be, that we have entrusted power to, that have basically, as we now see, that has been exposed, that it's almost innumerable at the billions and billions, maybe even $1 trillion in terms of waste and fraud and the abuse that we're in, and the burden, the debts that we're carrying right now, with the number of people who've been certainly convicted. But these are probably two of the most powerful people, certainly in our lifetime, or certainly over the past, say, half century, that has been impacting government here in Chicago and certainly in the state.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And as you know, one of the systems that they've greatly undercut is the real estate property evaluation assessment system, because both Burke and Madigan were parts of law firms that represented private clients before the entities that regulate real estate assessments. And for many, many years, the commercial people who have the money and enough money at stake to make it worth their while have hired lobbyists to get them reductions in the assessments on their large commercial buildings that basically shift more of the real estate tax burden onto the ordinary individual property owners.
Yeah, I've been working with Fritz Kagi, the assessor, over the past since he's gotten into office, and we have become much more acutely aware of what that corruption is, and what has been going on between Michael Madigan, Ed Burke, and the Board of Review, and largely Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas, who are basically their water carriers, where they have put this rule in place that you have to have a lawyer if you want to appeal your taxes. And of course, the two most powerful lawyers are Michael Madigan and Ed Burke, that they've been shifting billions of dollars in taxes off of wealthy property owners downtown onto the ordinary homeowners, where the homeowners are paying an average of about $1,000 more a year on their real estate taxes, and in some cases a little more in the suburbs, to subsidize very wealthy people's properties downtown, and they have gotten away with it for decades. And we have been working over this past election cycle, and going to continue to work to try to educate people on what is really happening and the changes that we need to make.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And now we're seeing a similar effort at the federal government level with billionaires trying to shift more of the tax burden for the federal government onto ordinary taxpayers by enacting tariffs, which function essentially as surcharges on ordinary consumers, much more than on rich people, and by trying to cut the income taxes for very rich people when they're already at historically low levels. So we are seeing exactly the same kind of thing going on at the federal level now that you've described as going on at the Illinois level as well.
So I was reading an article just coming back from Miami, and this morning I'm reading an article that a story that you contributed to on NBC, that Michael Madigan, his campaign war chest that was fueled by millions of dollars even post him resigning from 2021. What is that all about? But he's been able to use those funds to pay for his legal defense, use campaign funds for a campaign which you are not campaigning for, or certainly not supporting any other campaigns, but you're using millions of dollars of campaign funds to pay for your legal defense. It just, even to say it, sounds as though it's corrupt and illegal. What can we do about that? And why isn't it why can't we have something in place, as I said before, that if you are a person in a public official position, and certainly an elected person, and you get indicted for a crime, that your campaign funds should be completely off limits to use for any type of legal defense?
That would actually be a relatively easy change to make, Mark. Under the state's campaign finance laws, there is a section in the code that has a number of specific things that you cannot use campaign funds for, a list of about 10 things. And if you added to that list, it's prohibited to use funds for defending a criminal indictment for public corruption. That would mean that they could not use those funds for that purpose. Now, the place where it gets a little sticky is when you have people making, if you have opponents or the opposing party or harassers making frivolous charges against politicians, then there's an argument that you should allow them to use their funds for that, particularly if they're not rich people who could otherwise pay for their defense costs. But one way of potentially handling that would be to say you cannot use those funds for criminal defense without the express permission of the Illinois State Board of Elections, for instance. And even then, you can only use them up to, say, $50,000 on a case, which is a lot less than it costs to defend a serious criminal cases like the Madigan and Burke cases, and prevent them from using up their funds that way. The problem is, right now, the Illinois Supreme Court, in the 2022 decision that involved Alderman Solis using campaign funds to pay his defense costs, has said that, well, the Illinois law does not specifically prohibit this use of funds. It doesn't endorse it either. So the Illinois State Board of Elections has to make a determination on a case-by-case basis. And they're an agency that does not like to get into the middle of political disputes. So as a general matter, they're going to allow politicians to use their campaign funds to defend corruption charges unless and until the legislature does something about it.
Yeah, I think that as I was saying earlier when I opened up the program, that this is going to have to be pushed by a mass number of the public, is going to have to put pressure on the General Assembly. I mean, really threaten the General Assembly that, listen, these are the things that these reforms have to be put into place, or we have to replace you with one who will put them into place. I think we have to have that kind of form of a threat on the General Assembly, because it's literally impossible for us to expect for them to police themselves.
I agree. It's expecting people to police themselves does not work in many cases. And history has certainly proven that. So I agree that we need to bring public pressure to enact more meaningful ethical reforms along these lines.
Yeah, listen, we are largely a Democratic state. I'm a Democrat. I don't want that to change.
Right.
But I think we need to do away with people who are corrupt. There are some great Democrats out there, and I think potentially some great Democrats that will serve. But I think that the infrastructure here has been so entrenched that good people just, refuse to even go near it. It's toxic and they won't go near it. But I think if we could enforce some real reforms in there, we could have some very good people serving in our legislative bodies.
I totally agree with you. I think it could be done, but it will take public pressure, because as the restraints that the legislators have put on the Inspector General show, they are very leery of doing anything that could come back to haunt them. So those legislators who really aren't concerned about being charged with any kind of corruption or wrongdoing are more supportive of these reforms than people who may be operating a little more on the edges.
Yeah, and you just wonder how many people are free from that. How many people are free from that because of the power that Michael Madigan and Ed Burke had over these people. So they had to, if they wanted to be there, they had to play. They had to play in the game, which means that they probably have, violated some law somewhere, and could be at risk for prosecution.
Yeah, and they haven't necessarily violated some law. If they're listening to a lobbyist and say they are convinced by the lobbyist reasoning about why something is or isn't good for the public, a good book to read on this that I would recommend to your listeners would be a book called Republic Lost by Larry Lessig, which was published in 2010. It was focused on the federal system, but it goes through in detail the way in which the current campaign finance system encourages people to operate at the edges, and almost forces them to do so if they want to continue to get elected or reelected.
Yeah, I talk to people. I am organizing a independent Black Democratic voting bloc, and the goal is to eventually for that to be as significant as we can. Our initial goal is to get up to 100,000 people. If we can get to 100,000 people, we can align with groups like yours and other groups that can seriously put pressure on our Black representatives that we need these serious reforms. I believe that we may be able to get, if we can have that kind of strength, so we put that kind of pressure on them that they have got to put these reforms in place, and then that we can really empower a real independent inspector general, so that they can really do their jobs and without retribution or the threat of retribution or the General Assembly having any power to get in the way of them keeping a check on waste, fraud, and abuse. Government has got to work. Government is important, and it's got to work. And we've got to make sure that the people that we entrust in those positions cannot continue to go and use those positions for their own personal gain.
Agreed. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think your effort is a step in the right direction. Well,
we're going to continue to do that, and certainly, I I've been working with David Orr for a number of years, someone who I respect highly and have always respected even before I got into politics myself. But I've always respected him tremendously, and I have a very limited a list of people within government that I can say that I respect and trust, which is a pretty sad commentary, because I think we should be able to have more people that are serving in positions of the public interest that we can rely on.
I totally agree with you. And like I said, the system itself needs to be improved, the campaign finance system, because right now, in order to raise the money that people feel they need to get elected, it does encourage them to operate at the edges on a lot of issues, not necessarily the top issues, but as Lessig puts it in his book, not issues maybe 1 through 10 on their priority list, but on issues 11 through 1,000, maybe it does have a significant influence down there. And that's corrupting essentially our system. But I agree with you, and I certainly support David. He's a member of our board as well, and I personally represented him in some lawsuits when the state of Illinois refused to, in the 90s, implement the Motor Voter Act, making it easier for people to register to vote, because our Republican governor and secretary of the state at the time were intimidated by the National Republican Party, even though they're regarded as people who were moderates at this point. It was Edgar, who was governor at that point, and George Ryan, who was secretary of state. And we had to sue them to get them to follow federal law and to not adopt a two-tier voting system like they have in Mississippi, where you have to register separately for federal and state elections. So yes, I totally agree with your approach.
So let me, in this last few minutes, I want to look at, I was looking at the astonishing numbers with that Michael Madigan. He was paid a pension of $158,027 a year after he resigned from office in 2021. He's collected more than $589,000, which is just astonishing numbers. And we can go on down the line of, retired superintendents that's getting, that kind of money, that's retired from a district that has 2 or 3 schools in it. Right. I mean, this is the kind of corruption that erodes public trust, right? Which also erodes public's participation.
It does. It does, but it also has the potential, when people are not well informed, to distort the issues. The way, for instance, Musk and Trump are currently saying they're cutting waste, fraud, and abuse from the federal government. Right. And that's not really what they're doing. So with respect to the Illinois pension issue, I've been part of some groups that have looked at that issue. And what really happened there was Illinois state government, both Republicans and Democrats, share responsibility for underfunding that system, as well as for allowing some abuses at the top. But the abuses at the top are not the primary problem with that system. The primary problem is that the legislature and various governors of both parties allowed the state to skip out on making payments that it should have been making to the pension system over the last 30 or 40 years. And that's why we're in the hole we are with respect to the pension systems.
And what's the reason? What is the primary reason, or your opinion, the primary reasons why the governors did not pay the pensions for all these years? Why were they not doing it?
Sure, because it's a significant chunk of money, and they're always under pressure not to raise taxes, not to pay what it costs sometimes to, the cost of keeping government running. So they're looking for any place they can cut. And the problem with the pension system is they can cut it out of this year's budget, and the effects won't be felt really until many years later. So it's a free cut for them. And that's why they can abuse the system that way.
And just keep kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and maybe, and I'm sure that all this corruption that's been uncovered. I saw an interview that Dick Simpson did that said, Chicago is the most corrupt metropolitan district in the country, and the state of Illinois is the third most corrupt state in terms of state government in the country. And it just exemplifies just the great work that could have been done to impact so many lives, and that maybe we could have a balanced budget if we didn't have all of this corruption in place.
Well, if you look at both the federal and state budget, a lot of what we're paying for now are things where people put things on the credit card and never made the payments they should have made in the past. So yeah, that is a problem in both places. I love Dick Simpson. I'm familiar with his book. But I think the problems are actually more widespread across the country than he does. We're not alone in this boat.
Yeah, I can certainly I can certainly agree with you that, and I think it's probably gotten more pervasive over the last 20 years or so.
Absolutely.
Because people have found that being involved with politics is pays quite well, as opposed to being real public servants.
Absolutely, and the recent political developments at the national level have further fueled that problem.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, I don't know if you heard me say that they're not interested in cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. They're interested in shifting and cutting the services that are needed for poor and working class people, so that they can just shift the money over to pay for tax cuts for their preferential few.
I can't say I'm speaking for Reform for Illinois on this, but my personal opinion is that you're absolutely right on that, and that what is going on at the moment is basically a coup in which the president is attempting to collect and consolidate power so that he can operate as an autocrat or a dictator.
Yeah, speaking of that, you as a lawyer, the wall, I believe that we have our judiciary is really kind of the only hope that we have right now to protect us from much of what they're trying to do. Do you see that wall being pretty strong?
I have concerns. These are my concerns. I think at the trial court level, the judges who sit at the trial court level and will initially hear the cases, yes, I think the system is strong with good judges appointed by people from both parties at the trial court level. Once you get up to the appellate court level, it gets a little more political. And there are significant people on the appellate courts who have views that I think are at odds with our basic notions of what it means to be an American democracy or republic. And I think that's also particularly true and particularly problematic at the Supreme Court level. That's my personal view. But that's the problem with relying on the courts, is ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court gets the final word on a lot of these issues. And I do not trust the current majority of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, I concur with you there. Well, speaking of the Supreme Court, going back to our state Supreme Court, I think that the Supreme Court, our federal Supreme Court, has corrupted or certainly has tainted our state Supreme Courts.
Yes.
I was shocked that when Ed Burke was convicted of his 16 felonies, that the ARDC went before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would not even hear it to suspend, not to revoke, but to suspend his license. I thought that they brought a level of discredit to the Supreme Court by that one disgraceful act.
I agree with you, and I think that while I have great respect for Ann Burke, who was on the Supreme Court at that point and is married to Ed Burke, I think that the appearance was very bad. And, if they had legitimate reasons for doing what they did, they certainly never expressed them, and I doubt that there are legitimate reasons for doing what they had in not suspending him. So I agree with you there. And this current Supreme Court has, the U.S. Supreme Court has tied the hands of a lot of states by deeming essentially the rights to use a corrupt finance system to be a constitutional right under the First Amendment, which legally I disagree with. But that's an issue for another time.
All right. David Melton, thank you very much, President and Chairman of Reform Illinois. I certainly appreciate you coming on in such short notice. We're going to have to continue our collaboration and engagement in this process because we've got a lot of work, but I think we got a lot of good work that we can make happen considering what has just taken place. But I think we certainly need to take advantage of it and to try to improve our government.
I would say from your lips to God's ears, but I also am a student of history. And I know that when things like Reconstruction came to an end, it took a long time to get back to the basic principles that the Civil War was fought over, for instance.
Yes. All right. Well, we've got work ahead of us, but there are those of us out here who, believe in government. And I believe that I firmly believe that if you can engage people, if you can get people to understand what the level of power that they actually have by engaging the process, that we can move it, further a little bit faster. It's not going to be like lightning speed, but we certainly can make some significant progress.
I share that hope and that limited degree of optimism.
All right, David Melton, thank you so much for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. All right, folks, listen, I'm going to open up the phone lines for your phone calls. That was David Melton, who is President and Chairman of Reform Illinois. We have a lot of work that we have to do, but this work can only be empowered when there are more people involved in the process. The work that David Melton and Elisa and David Orr are doing there, and the work that we are organizing to do here and to collaborate with is great work. But that work can be infused by the participation of the electorate. Your engagement and your voice is absolutely critical to the advancement and the level of advancement that we make on some of these initiatives. Now, we have a lot of work that we have to do and a lot of things that have to be corrected here in the state of Illinois, where we are in Cook County and in Chicago, but that is going to take support from the public. The more people that you have supporting the people who are actually doing the work, the more we will be able to advance that work. Now, I am one who believes that the methodology that the MAGA group has used is the right methodology. Their purpose for using it is off. And we, those of us who are good citizens, who want to see our government work properly, who want to see our government be more equitable, more efficient, we can use the same methodology to put the pressure on the people that we have elected and entrusted in our public offices to advance the kinds of reforms that we have a more efficient government, that it works for the people who need it the most. Government is not set up for people to go in and to make it their own personal enterprise. And that's what is happening at just about every level of our government, is that people get involved in it. Now, I'm going to sort of make an analysis. It's the same thing with the church. over the last 20 or 30 years, there are people who are using the church as their own personal enterprise. People want to become pastors because you have pastors buying jets and living in fancy lives that, you know, Jesus never exemplified. Well, that's the same thing with our government. Our government is not set up for people to go in and to become personally wealthy. And but the only way that that is going to be checked is that is going to be checked by the public being engaged, being educated, being informed as to what is going on, so that we can hold those persons that we have in public office to account to deliver what we need to have delivered. Because what is going on now is it cannot be sustainable, and it's going to end up costing us more, and it is costing us more. We are paying the bill for it. In Chicago, I don't know if there's another city in the country that has the level of paying out police misconduct settlements than we have in Chicago. I think we have the dubious honor of being number one in that area with all these cases of police misconduct. Well, all of that really boils down to that we have a lot less oversight in these areas of government and people using them for their personal benefits. When you get elected, go to public office, that's why it's called a public office. And you're called a public servant. You don't take these positions to get wealthy. You take these positions to go and do something good. There is a certain level of a sacrifice that one makes. And I believe that there are more people out there that would go and would make those commitments. But because of the level of corruption that exists in every level of our government, whether it be Republican or Democrats, it keeps people who would otherwise be very good people to work in our governmental systems to make it work better for us to do that work. But it's going to take a mass amount of us to make that work easier and to make that work go forward. But when we understand the power that we have in terms of voters, of what we can force state representatives and state senators to do. Now, they know that because when you take the low voter turnout that we had in the primary of last year, which was about somewhere between 17 and 22%, that's not going to be very motivating for anybody who is in elective office to feel compelled to do anything differently than they're doing it. They're looking at us and saying, well, you know, there's nobody really participating. All I need is just enough votes for me to get reelected. But we've got to change that. We have to change that. And if we don't change that, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And I am one of those optimistic people who believe that if we can get the public, if we can wake the public up and get the public's attention to see that mass participation can bring about some real positive changes. Is it going to happen overnight? No, it won't happen overnight, but we can put things into place to where over the next 5 years, 10 years, we can see that we are improving the way that government actually works and supposed to work if we have that kind of engagement. And I believe that as the public, you will be more motivated when you will start to see that as a result of your engagement and your participation that allows for people who have the understanding of it, like, you know, people who are working in organizations like Reform Illinois, the people who are doing that kind of work, that it will strengthen their ability to be able to go and to sit down with legislators, to go and sit down and put policies and reforms forward that will compel the legislature to do things, even though they may not want to do them. But if they have the level of a threat, meaning that we have built this mass army of voters that are calling for these kinds of changes, then you will find that you'll have public representatives that will start to make those change. Now, that's why I want for us to grow 10 by 10 to win, so that we have this Democratic voting block, so that we can compel the people in the districts that represent our communities that we want for these reforms to be put into place. They need to be put into place so that government is working for the people. It is not working for the people within those seats, that they're entrusted with those. We give them the opportunity to go there to be public representatives, to represent the public, not represent their person, because that's what we have much of. Michael Madigan being convicted, and Ed Burke. I mean, these are two people combined have been in office for 100 years and have inflicted a whole lot of pain on the state and on the city, but they have benefited enormously. Both Ed Burke and Michael Madigan are very, very wealthy men by shifting tax burdens of wealthy people onto everyday average working people, homeowners, having to pay, somewhere 10, 15% more on their taxes to subsidize people who earn a lot more money than they do, so that they get a tax break on a property that, when they get ready to sell that property, they sell that property for the full value, but you and I have subsidized their investment over the period of time that they've owned the property. Only because of a few people. And those few people were Ed Burke, Michael Madigan, Larry Rogers Jr., and George Cardenas. These are people, these are the four people in our real estate tax appeal area that has caused for untold billions of dollars in taxes that you and I are paying, that wealthy people are not paying their fair share. This is not some attack on wealthy people, or that we somehow don't believe that people should be wealthy. It's okay for people to be wealthy. It's not okay for people to be wealthy and then pass their bills on to people who are not. That's not okay. It is akin to a wealthy person taking their family to a steak dinner. You're just not invited, but you shift and you pay the bill. That's what is happening with us. We're paying somebody else's bill, but we're not able to enjoy the benefits of what it is that they're doing. And then you can barely pay your bills for subsidizing somebody who is wealthy. That's the reality of where we are, but that is the reality of the level of corruption. And it is also, in some respect, it's an indictment on us that we have allowed for people like Michael Madigan and Ed Burke to stay into public office for as many years as they did, and milking the system. If I had my druthers, if you're serving in public office, you certainly would not be able to do business with any governmental agency or anything that has to do with any governmental agency, like representing people the way that Ed Burke and Michael Madigan were involved in. I mean, that was what I would call corruption, doing it with the lights on. But yet we celebritize these people and we turn them into celebrities when in fact they are predators. They have preyed on all of us for all these years. And they're not the only ones, but just think of the level of misuse and misappropriation and waste of billions of dollars that could have gone to strengthen communities that are not doing well today, but that could have been doing well if they had the resources, and certainly if we had people in place that were better managers of our resources. That's what you and I have to do. We can't just sit around and complain about these things. You have to get active. It's not one of those things where we can sit on the sideline. One of my favorite hosts says that, politics is not a spectator sport. We have to get active and we have to get engaged. And you have enormous ability and potential of power to make things happen. But you're not going to make things happen by sitting on the sidelines. And we're going to slow progress down if we only have a few people trying to do all of the heavy lifting. That's why unions, I always use the example of unions. Unions are so strong because, one, they are informed, they're engaged, and they're unified. That's why they have such influence. Well, there is no greater union or potential union than the electorate. There is no greater union that if we were to amass, let's say 100 or 200,000 people in a block, one united block here in Illinois, we could have as much influence on these kinds of reforms. People like the work that David Melton and David Orr and other people are doing, great work. To have that number of people behind them doing that work will make the work that they're doing that much easier. And it will compel the people who are in those political positions to make the kind of changes that we need. Now, given the fact that Michael Madigan handpicked the current speaker, Chris Welch, who is somebody that I cannot say that I have been overly impressed with at all, or just impressed with. But I have to believe that if he was handpicked by Michael Madigan, that he is absolutely carrying the torch and the playbook of Michael Madigan. We need to have an absolute separation of that. We have to make sure that a person who is in those kinds of positions are not serving the people like Michael Madigan, because, of course, there are people who believe, and to some degree, that you were handpicked by Michael Madigan, and even though Michael Madigan is now a convicted felon, that Michael Madigan has some influence on decisions that are being made. I don't know how far-fetched that is, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of that systemic corruption is playing itself out. But the only way for us to break it down is that we have to have more of us involved in the process. There has to be more of us involved in the process to change these conditions. There's a ton of reform that needs to be done. And again, I believe that we can make more progress the more people that we have engaged, the more process or progress that we can make. You don't even have to do the work. You don't even have to do the work. There are people who have the know. They just need the support. They need to have the push. If we had, let's take, for example, why I use unions and their influence. Let's take the United Auto Workers. Remember when Joe Biden was the presumptive nominee? The United Auto Workers had gone to the auto industry and said, look, we forewent our raises. We loaned you our raises and our increases from 2013 because the companies were soft and the companies were having some problems. And we basically loaned you the money so that you can become profitable. And the agreement is that you would give us what we were supposed to get back then when you became profitable and the companies were strong and healthy. Well, the companies made record profits and they became very strong. But they turned to the labor and said, we can't do what we told you we were going to do back in 2013. Now, mind you, they were not asking for anything extra. They were not asking for anything else. They were asking what was promised to them back in 2013, almost 10 years ago. Not even considering inflation. Just give us what you promised us that you would give us. Just give us the money back. And they said no. Well, the United Auto Workers is made up of 400,000 members that are active in the United States and in Canada. There are 580,000 that are retired members, so they have a total of 980,000 nationwide and in Canada. 980,000 nationwide and in Canada. That group was able to compel a sitting president to get on Air Force One, a sitting president, which has never happened before in the history of the country, that a sitting president has ever gone and stood on a picket line. They didn't ask, they compelled for the president of the United States to get on Air Force One and to fly down to Michigan, which means that they had to arrange all types of security and mobilize all types of security for the president to get there, just so that the president can go and stand on a picket line. That's what people influence does. It's just an example of the influence of the public. And what I am saying to you is we are no different. We are no different, but we have a greater pool of people to pull from. I told you it's 980,000 people, 400,000 active, 580,000 retirees, total of 980,000 nationwide. Well, we have right here in Chicago, in the metropolitan area of Chicago and Cook County, we have more than 1.5 million registered Black voters to date. More than 1.5 million right here in Cook County in the major metropolitan area of Chicago, that we could build our own independent Democratic voting bloc, 10 by 10 to win, that we could have, and we can, the goal is for us to get to 100,000 people this year. We want to be at a minimum of 100,000 people as a base this year. 100,000 people, we can influence any political office from our local to our state to our federal offices. And you don't have to do anything other than be in the union. When it's time for us to show up, you show up. That's the strength, the power of the numbers. Now, you either have to have a lot of money or you have to have a lot of votes. We don't have a lot of money, but we do have a lot of votes. And to be able to pull from 1.5 million people in this major metropolitan region, when the United Auto Workers has 400,000 nationwide and in Canada, of what they were able to do. Why? Because the president understood. They have influence. They have influence. The president understood that if he was going to get reelected, he had to have the support of labor. He had to have the support of labor. Now, I told you that, and I'm going to try to get to it, but I want to play some important clips to you. Now, and I want to ask you, those of you, if you are not involved, I'm going to put it in the chat. Please, please, we are building and we need to build this independent Black voting, Democratic voting bloc. So I'm asking you, if you're not a part of 10 by 10 to win, I'm asking you if you would get involved by texting 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385 so that you can get into the text alert. And that you can receive, you can get into the text alert and receive the Zoom meeting link that we do every Thursday. So the meeting link goes out every Thursday. Hold on one second here. Let me make sure I get it right. There we go. So please text that number and share it with other people that you know to get involved with the, I made a mistake. I made a mistake there. Let me, let's see, I got to correct it. Hold on one second there, folks. Okay, let me redo it because I transposed a number. Okay, you're trying to go too fast. Text 10x10 to 855-909-1385. Okay, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to send it back out. All right, there you go. Yeah. So let's build the voting block. Now, strategically, we build the voting block. We self-fund everything that we don't have to depend on outside influence or outside resources. Now, there are some people who want to financially support our campaign for recruitment. And we'll be discussing that in our upcoming meeting, and then we'll be taking a vote on whether or not we accept that kind of support, because everything that we do is done and voted on by the body. I don't make unilateral decisions for the body. Just like a president of a union doesn't make unilateral decisions without discussing it with the body and getting the body to vote on it or to ratify or to reject it. That's the way that it works, is that anything that we do, it is done by a vote, and the majority vote determines on which direction that we will go. What we have never done is we have never institutionalized, we have never organized our own independent Black voting bloc that should be institutionalized, that it becomes a local state effort here that we will be able to expand nationally. We have wonderful organizations like the NAACP. We have Rainbow Push. We have National Action Network. We have these organizations that are the Urban League that are doing wonderful work. The one thing we have never done is that we have never institutionalized organizing our own independent Black Democratic voting bloc. Before Dr. King got involved, before the movement of Dr. King, that's why Dr. King is so important, not to just recite speeches, but to actually enact the disciplines that he talked about. Before Dr. King, there was less than 2% of Black participation in or even registered to vote. Dr. King's movement caused for there to be almost a 60% jump in terms of voter registration and voter participation. As a direct relation to Dr. King's involvement and his push. So I know that we like to romanticize Dr. King's speeches, but romanticizing his speeches is not what we should be doing. What we should be doing is we should be implementing what Dr. King, the example that he left for us to do. That's what we should be doing. If we are truly going to honor the work and the legacy of Dr. King, that would be honoring the legacy and the work of Dr. King, is to be engaging the way that Dr. King taught us and he exemplified in his engagement. We have far more today as a result of that work from the past that we can engage and that we can advance our people and our communities all over the regions of where we live. And we have that responsibility. This thing that Donald Trump and Elon Musk, this coup that they're doing, or certainly trying to do, we have got to cut it off. And the way that we cut it off is that we've got to be engaged in the process. If we are not engaged in the process in mass numbers, then we are basically sanctioning the destruction of the progress that we are enjoying as to the work that people who have come before us, our parents, our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, people that we will never know, who sacrificed themselves, whose backs scrubbed sidewalks, fighting for us to have access. The Harriet Tubmans of the world, the Ida B. Wells of the world, the Fannie Lou Hamers, and on and on and on. These people who absolutely entrenched themselves and sacrificed for us to be where we are right now. But we cannot rest on this. We have more of a responsibility to carry that fight forward so that we are expanding and assuring that our communities are equitably treated. And we have great opportunity to do that now because we have more progress that we've been able to accomplish. But our success doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the people. And we have to use our advancement and our success for the people. And if we do not use it for the people, then we betray those who died and bled for us. Those are the words of Stokely Carmichael. That our success is not for us. Here's another clip that I saw on over the weekend. A woman who was on TikTok explaining the coup of Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Hey there, this will be short. 3 things. Number 1, yes, it's a coup, and the Republicans in the House and the Senate are in on it. Number 2, Doge is not a thing. The president is not legally allowed to create a department without congressional authorization. So what we have are a bunch of randos, led by a rich guy, firing people and stealing our private data. Trump and the Republicans sold our country to this man for the low price of $277 million, paid to Trump and Republicans. And number 3, Musk and his goonies are not cutting waste. They're doing 2 things: closing the agencies that were investigating Elon's companies, and taking food and medicine from those with the least and giving the money to the wealthiest. How proud they must feel to take from those who have the least. And again, the Republicans are not only in on it, they helped plan this. Cowards and traitors, all. Hang in there. Love your neighbors. Sorry.
It doesn't get any richer than that. Now, I said to you last week, and I talked about this on a little rant that I did over the weekend, that I have clips of an undercover investigation that 2 reporters that were posed as wealthy Republican donors that infiltrated Project 2025. I have clips, and I'm going to play those clips of Russell Vought. Russell Vought, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump. These are the 3-headed beasts. Russell Vought served as Donald Trump's office and budget management chief in his first term. I'm not sure where they're trying to land him in this administration. But Russell Vought met with these 2 reporters that he thought were wealthy Republican donors. And he shared with them what the mission of Project 2025 is all about, or some of that. So I have several of the clips, and we're going to try to get a hold of a lot more of this, but we've broken it down so that you can see. Now, this is, again, an undercover sting, if you will. Russell Vought, who is one of the lead masterminds and authors of Project 2025 and served in Donald Trump's first administration, and I believe they're trying to place him somewhere in this administration. In fact, he's still calling the shots without having a official title. So this first clip is where he talks about year 5 of the Trump administration. This was before Trump was election. This is what they're talking about. Remember, they're talking about infusing or certainly implementing this in the first 180 days of this administration of Project 2025. Here he is talking about, he's saying of what year 5 is going to look like, or right now they're in year 5, which is the first year of his second term. So they're in it now, but this is what he was talking about prior to, leading up to the election.
This year has been predominantly now getting ready for a year 5 of a Trump administration. We have about 350 different documents that are regulations and things of that nature.
So what he's talking about, all these executive orders that you see being signed, these are the authors of those executive orders, of which Donald Trump later or earlier told us that he didn't know anything about it, and he thought it had some pretty extreme ideas and that sort of thing. And he tried to distance himself from Project 2025. And Russell Volt goes on to explain what the ploy or the strategy behind Donald Trump talking about distancing himself, because this was just a part of the strategy.
Notwithstanding, I expect you to hear 10 more times from the rally, the president, distancing himself from the left's boogeyman of Project 2025.
Yeah. And you're not worried about that?
I'm not worried about it. And so I see what he's doing is just very, very conscious distancing himself from a brand. He's very supportive of what we do, and know that we have all manner of things that we do that's, even unrelated to Project 2025.
Sure.
You got to see this one again. I got to play that for you again. Again, this is where Donald Trump, they've had conversations with him, and the man has stood before the world, stood before the country and said he knew nothing about it. They had some pretty radical ideas. He doesn't know anything about everybody and there's more than 100 people who were involved in writing Project 2025, 922-page manifesto. All of those people worked in the Trump administration. Now, he might not have known them personally, but they worked in his administration. So in order for them to work in his administration, they had to be vetted and approved. But again, remember, Trump said he didn't know anything about Project 2025. Now you don't hear him say anything about Project 2025 because he's signing all of the executive orders. He just told you there was about 350 orders. That's what he really meant about signing off to those initiatives in year 5 in the first 180
Notwithstanding,
whoops, sorry about that.
Notwithstanding, I expect you to hear 10 more times from the rally, the president, distancing himself from the left's boogeyman of Project 2025.
Yeah. And you're not worried about that?
I'm not worried about it. And so I see what he's doing is just very, very conscious distancing himself from a brand. He's very supportive of what we do, and know that we have all manner of things that we do that's, even unrelated to Project 2025.
Sure.
So I wonder what that is. What he's talking about that's unrelated to Project 2025. And alt manner is what he said of what they do that's completely unrelated to Project 2025. Here's Russell Volt when he's talking about abortion and his views on abortion, which are pretty extreme. And just take a listen.
He talks about rape, incest, and life of the mother. I don't actually believe in those exceptions. I want to get to abolition, but we got to win elections. And so I want to get as far as we possibly can.
Here's a man who said that even if your daughter is raped or if there is incest, that there should be no there should not be any allowances for an abortion, any allowances. He wants for there to be a total abolition. Take a listen again.
He talks about rape, incest, and life of the mother. I don't actually believe in those exceptions. I want to get to abolition, but we got to win elections. And so I want to get as far as we possibly can.
Here's a man who believes in no exceptions, that there is no exception whatsoever for a woman to or a little girl who's been raped. There should be no exception that that person should have to carry that pregnancy to term, even if they've been violated. That they should have to carry that child to term. These are the monsters that are now in charge of our government. This was before, and they had been telegraphing it. And we had been trying to warn people that this is what they are talking about. Here he is talking about the nation should be a Christian nation.
So I want to make sure that we can say we're a Christian nation, and my viewpoint is mostly that I would probably be Christian nationism. That's pretty close to Christian nationalism. Can we, if we're going to have legal immigration, can we get people that actually believe in Christianity? Is that something, or do we have to have, are we not allowed to ask questions about Sharia law?
Okay, so and who gets to define what Christianity is, because they have an idea of what they think Christianity is that may be very different from what your view or my view or Black people's view of Christianity or the Bible's view of Christianity. So they want for this to be a Christian nation. We are not a Christian nation. We are a secular nation. And the founders set it up that way. But he wants to do away with the Constitution and to make, he said Christianism, which is as close to Christian nationalism, according to his words.
He talks about rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I don't actually believe in those exceptions. I want to get to abolition, but we got to win elections. And so I want to get as far as we possibly can.
All right, that was the wrong clip, but I was sorry.
I want to make sure that we can say we're a Christian nation, and my viewpoint is mostly that I would probably be Christian nationism. That's pretty close to Christian nationalism. Can we, if we're going to have legal immigration, can we get people that actually believe in Christianity? Is that something, or do we have to have, are we not allowed to ask questions about Sharia law?
All right, and here's Donald Trump blessing their work. Remember, he told us he didn't know anything about it, and he thought that some of the things were pretty radical and outrageous. But here's Russell Vought, his OBM, or Office of Management and Budget, yes, director, who is the mastermind behind this. He's saying he knew nothing about it, that they have not been in touch. Okay. Again, these are undercover reporters posed as wealthy donors that Russell Vought is spilling the beans about Project 2025.
He's been at our organization. He's raised money for our organization. He's blessed.
He's raised money for the organization. He's been to the organization, but yet he doesn't know anything about the organization. And here he's talking about the ideal world of deportation.
In an ideal world, I mean, I think we could save the country in a sense of, the largest deportation in history.
And even pornography.
We'd have a national ban on pornography if we could, right?
Mass deportation, and then put a national ban on pornography. They want to be in your living rooms. They want to be in your bedrooms. They want to determine what it is that you watch on television. This is a person who is right now who has put forth all these executive orders that you see the president signing, this is the person who's
80% of my time is working on the plans of what's necessary to take control of these bureaucracies. I want to be the person that crushes the deep state. I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. It is defunding it, it's impoundment, the ability to not spend money, it's getting rid of their independence.
So this is what they're talking about, right? The deep state. Now, I don't know what the deep state is. They've never defined what the deep state is. And all of these phrases and these terms are more distractions than anything else. And I'm a little bit annoyed with the media or the mainstream media that they don't even ask these questions. They don't ask these questions. Can you define what the deep state is? What is the deep state? They keep using it. What is the deep state? Make them give an answer as to what the deep state is, because we don't know what the deep state is. I don't even think they know what the deep state is. But he says he wants to get rid of the deep state. Those are just code words, because there is no definition that they can give us of what the deep state is, just like they can't give you a definition of woke, of what their definition of woke is. Here's this last clip where he's talking about creating the shadow office.
We are trying to create a shadow Office of Management and Budget, a shadow National Security Council, and a shadow Office of Legal Counsel. These are the main organs in government that you need outside to create the battle plan.
And you're not going to publish those?
No.
They go straight to...
Yeah, they're very, very close hold.
What was that again? What was that again? Now, look at the three places where they are attacking now. He just fired or attempted to fire the head of the National Legal Counsel. These are the office that he said that they want to create this shadow, these shadow offices.
We are trying to create a shadow Office of Management and Budget, a shadow National Security Council, and a shadow Office of Legal Counsel. These are the main organs in government that you need outside to create the battle plan.
And you're not going to publish those?
No.
They go straight to...
Yeah, they're very, very close hold.
They're not going to publish them. I mean, you got to watch this just one more time. You got to watch this again.
We are trying to create a shadow Office of Management and Budget, a shadow National Security Council, and a shadow Office of Legal Counsel. These are the main organs in government that you need outside to create the battle plan.
And you're not going to publish those?
No.
They go straight to...
Yeah, they're very, very close hold.
That just means that they are not, they didn't want to disclose any of this. They don't want to disclose any of this. Look, let me just say to you that, and I have clips from let's see. I think I have some other clips of what they talked about in Project 2025. Here's somebody talking about the obstruction of border security.
Well, speaking of Congress, I think it's worth noting that a serious, tough, bipartisan border security measure was put forward in the Congress, in fact, co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee, which would have surged enforcement resources to the border, which would have provided substantial resources to fight cartels and to crack down on fentanyl trafficking, which would have tightened asylum standards and expedited adjudication and therefore removal timelines for those who were trying to enter the country without a valid reason to. former president put out the word that he wanted the bill stopped for political reasons, and the bill was stopped. In fact, not only was the bill stopped in the Senate, it was denied even a debate on the Senate floor. And this speaks to the corrosive impact of extreme partisanship and polarization in this country on our national security.
That was the Senate committee who was meeting. They were talking about using immigration. As I said, they are not interested in fixing the immigration problem. If they were really interested in fixing immigration, they could fix immigration in 15 minutes. But the Republicans, because they don't have a track record of actually solving problems, they need something that they use as bait for their base so that they can dangle out there. And the border is the lightning rod that they use to get people who are not very informed, people who really don't pay attention to the details of the processes. So they use the border as a boogeyman, pretty much. That they use the border as a boogeyman. But they're not interested in actually doing anything about it. They just want to sort of get you excited, to have you thinking that they're doing something about it, even though Donald Trump talks about doing these mass deportations. Donald Trump is not doing any more deportations than Joe Biden was doing on an average daily basis. The difference between what Donald Trump is doing and what the previous administration was doing is that they send the cameras out to televise it. That's the only difference. The numbers are pretty much the same. This idea of mass deportation is not happening. Not happening. He has gotten some of you so excited to thinking that he was going to do something. Now you see exactly what he is doing. All of those people who thought they were so profound in standing and supporting this man. Now, let me tell you what he may end up doing. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, because the Republicans want to infiltrate right here in Illinois. They want to infiltrate Illinois. And I would not be a bit surprised. He's already pardoned Rod Blagojevich. All right. And of course, Rod Blagojevich is sucking on his toes. And he is sucked the mayor of New York in there, and they got allegedly there's some sort of quid pro quo there, and you've had this mass resignation of I shouldn't say mass, but this resignation of assistant U.S. attorneys who refuse to drop the case. Against Eric Adams. Eric Adams allegedly has said that if they drop the case, that he will give whatever support is needed for the mass deportations. I mean, the shameful, disgusting behavior of Eric Adams, who basically have offered himself up to be a modern day slave, because there are conditions that he has to be bound to. Even though he said he's not bound to, he's bound to them. He's not going to criticize Trump. He's not going to criticize the Republicans. And he is going to assist them in order for him to be pardoned or to have the charges dismissed. Period. All right. Well, listen, that's going to be it for me tonight. Certainly, thank you all for being here. I'll be coming back maybe later this week doing a brief program. Thank you all for tuning in to the Monday night edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com. Thank you, Brother Earl, for allowing for us to be here with you in this platform every Monday night on intellectualradio.com, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I want to ask you to please, if you have not already gone to register at Mark Wallace, The People's Show on YouTube, and share that information with others so that we can get more people engaged and more people participating so that we could actually make things happen through our coalition and our coalescing through this program. I didn't get to Eddie Glaude's book tonight. I may get to it if I do another program later on, another video this week. If not, I'll get to it and read some of the excerpts from the book, We Are the Leaders, that we have been looking for. Thank you all so much for being here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.